What is happening, baby? Welcome back to the Fantasy Football Huddle, presented by the Huddle Chat Sports Show. As always, I'm your host, Dallas Clark, also known as Indo as my Indo. Please, if you like the content, make sure you hit that like button. It helps me out so much more than you really realize. And a subscription also helps out not only yourself, but me as well. So make sure you smash that like button, hit that subscriptions bar, and that notifications bell so you always stay in tune as soon as the episodes come out so you can get that edge on those other idiots in your fantasy football league. Now, we're going into week 4, and week 4 we're kind of starting to feel like we're getting a little settled in. You know, there's a lot of those questions have been answered, but with those questions being answered on most players, we're starting to get a lot more questions asked. Like, which player should I start in my flex this week? Should I actually start that player that I've looked at on my bench the last few weeks and said, I have to start this guy? Is the matchup that my player is going to be facing this week enough for me to really take him out of my starting lineup? Those kind of questions are the ones that will win and lose you fantasy football weeks and get you or make you miss in those playoffs in your fantasy football league here in about 10 weeks. Now, I mean, we still have a lot of time. If you started out 0-3 and you found yourself in a hole, you still have a time to dig out of the hole. You just got to make sure you don't get too down, don't give up, and don't fall in love on your players. But today we're talking about those week 4 stardoms and situms. Before we get kicked off into the stardoms and situms, of course, we want to give a big shout out and a big thank you to our sponsor, Danklyfe Clothing brand. Thank you so much, Danklyfe Clothing brand. We're working on such cool partnerships right now with Danklyfe Clothing brand. We have a lot of really cool Huddle Chat Sports Show merchandise coming down the line. She's a big reason that we have a lot of these new logos and real cool looks that we have over here on the Fantasy Football Huddle. And honestly, your football team, your favorite team, the team that you let decide your mood for weeks at a time, months at a time, years at a time, it's a big part of your life. And having personalized clothing, personalized products, personalized gear that you can get made for your team and yourself, whether it's your child's youth football team, whether it's your favorite college team, your favorite NFL team, anything that you kind of have a part of yourself, you can ask over at Danklyfe Clothing brand, and they have a lot of cool merchandise. We got tumblers, she's got t-shirts, she's got all kind of really cool merchandise. Make sure you check out the Danklyfe Facebook page over at Danklyfe on Facebook. Now, of course, also make sure you check out the Rick T podcast on Sundays. If we hit that 30 viewers, you definitely are going to be entered into the raffle. As long as you tune in yourself, you'll be entered into the raffle to get free gear. If you want a brand new jersey for your team and you don't want to buy it, tune into the Rick T podcast on Sundays. We have a great time over there. It's a pregame show, and we break down everything that you need to know in the NFL and all of the breaking news right before kickoff. So check out the Rick T podcast on Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube, live on Sunday mornings. Check us out. I'll also see all the social media content and get involved. Tell a friend. Like I said, once we hit that 30 viewers, we'll be going out and giving out free gear. Now let's get kicked off into those stardoms and situms this week. We're done with all the introductions and all of the announcements. Now, let's get it started off the way that we always do. If you do, no pressure if you don't. Now is the time to smoke them if you got them. Let's get it cracked off, and let's get right into the news, baby. Christmas.
Like a torpedo runs to another tackle. They can't get him down.
90-yard touchdown! 90-yard touchdown!
First and goal at the 1. Wentz under center. Now it's a wildcat. Wildcat to Hines. Hands off the
The Triple Crown winner, Jonathan Tucker, for the longest field goal in NFL history.
His first catches by a rookie. Jamar Chase is a man among boys.
Now, kicking off my stardoms and situms, of course, we got to talk about the fact that when we're talking about stardoms and situms, this is if you have a player in your lineup that you're kind of considering, that you have another player that's similar value that you're thinking about starting in your lineup. You know, if I say sit a player and you're like, you know, this is my number 2 running back, I don't really have the ability to, of course, I'm not saying that this player is going to be terrible. I'm saying to temper your expectations. And of course, I have been wrong. I've been wrong in the last few weeks, but I have hit more than I have missed. Now, starting off the startums and situms this week, we're going to be talking about the running backs first, the most important position. We lost a lot of running backs, and there was a lot of injuries and a lot of questions at the running back position. If you redrafted right now, which one of the running backs could you really say is that guy? Out of the top 10, top 20 running backs, how many of those running backs have really been what you thought they were going to be when you drafted them? From Jonathan Taylor, Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey, all of them. I mean, you got Nick Chubb, some of the couple of outliers, but for the most part, everybody's been fairly disappointing, and the running back has been extremely valuable. You'll notice nobody in your league is really willing to give up running backs for very much right now. So the running backs are going to be very important, and those decisions are going to be very important in your running back backfield. Now, my start at running back this week is going to be Breece Hall from the New York Jets. Now, you are kind of starting to see a change of leadership in that New York Jets backfield. Breece Hall is starting to kind of take over ownership from Michael Carter. Now, he is kind of splitting carries fairly evenly with Michael Carter at the moment, but that's kind of just limiting his ceiling. The floor has presented itself to be very high. Now you do have Zach Wilson coming back in the lineup, and me personally, I believe that's going to affect the game, and the fact that they're going to lean more on their run and let Zach Wilson kind of get his legs out from underneath him this week. I do also see him as a very nice flex option. Speaking about Breece Hall, the Steelers has allowed the 6th most fantasy points per game to running backs. They've had a lot of injuries, primarily to their main superstar on the defensive end of the ball, TJ Watt. So Breece Hall is definitely going to be somebody that I'm plugging into my flex lineups this week. Now, when we're talking about our sit at the running back position this week, I am going to be sitting Cam Akers from the Los Angeles Rams. That Rams backfield, I almost barely want anything to be a part of at the current moment. Akers saw 12 touches last week. Darrell Henderson only saw 4. So last week, it was Cam Akers' backfield. But it's definitely still a committee situation, definitely still a two-headed monster, so to speak. Cam Akers also just scored 10.1 points last week, which is kind of nice if you take out the fact that he did score a touchdown. So without that touchdown, Cam Akers would have been virtually useless last week, and we don't really want to guarantee that touchdown production. I see him as a flex starter against that Niners defense, but they have allowed the fewest points to runners in their last 8 games, going back even into last year's games. So Cam Akers is somebody that if I have a better option, I'm staying away from Cam Akers and plugging somebody else into my lineup. Now moving on to the pass catchers, my starting wide receiver of the week is going to be Drake London from the Atlanta Falcons. Drake London is averaging 17.1 PPR points per game in just his first 3 NFL games. I'd keep him in starting lineups too. At the current moment, the Falcons do host a Browns defense that has given up 4 touchdowns and the 5th most fantasy points to wide receivers. And I would honestly start Drake London in my lineup with confidence as my wide receiver 2, or at least my flex starter. But a pass catcher that I'm going to be staying away from, somebody that's not really giving me the vibes, is going to be DJ Moore from the Carolina Panthers. He's been absolutely terrible. He scored just 2.5 PPR points last week. Non-PPR, I think it was 1.5. He had 1 catch for 2 yards. I believe he had 1 rush for like 13 yards last week. He's now caught 3 or fewer passes in the first 3 games of the season. Baker Mayfield and that Carolina Panthers offense does not seem very synergetic at the current moment, and DJ Moore is giving me a lot of red flags and a lot of risk that I would like to keep out of my lineup if I can afford it at all costs. So stay away from DJ Moore. Now, talking about the people that will be throwing those passes to them this week, I'm talking about Jared Goff. Jared Goff is probably going to be my start of the week this week in my startup and situms column. Jared Goff, I definitely am plugging into my own personal lineup with confidence. He's now thrown for at least 215 yards in his first 3 games. He's also thrown at least 1 touchdown in each game. Last week against the Washington Commanders, he threw for 4 touchdowns and has been very consistent and very surprising with this really nice Detroit Lions offense. Now, I will temper expectations a little bit with Amon-Ra St. Brown now being out for the game. So that is going to limit them, especially, but not having DeAndre Swift as well. Jared Goff is now going to be a fringe starter. He was definitely going to be a high-powered starter in my startums and situms column this week. However, I'm going to temper my expectations for Jared Goff. He may not have an explosive game, but I'm definitely starting Jared Goff in a pinch this week. But one quarterback that I'm going to be staying away from is somebody that everybody's falling in love with right now. T-Law, Trevor Lawrence from the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's looked good in the first 3 games. Last week, he threw 3 touchdowns against the Chargers. I can't really rank him in the top 12 amongst quarterbacks this week, though. He's playing that Eagles defense, and that Eagles defense has been a big part of the reason why they are 3-0. Of course, I'm not going to not give Jalen Hurts and that offense their flowers. I love me some Jalen Hurts, and you definitely got to be starting Jalen Hurts. But they're playing that Eagles defense that has been really one of their main parts of the reason that they're 3-0 at the current moment. That Eagles defense is one of the best in the leagues. The Eagles defense has also allowed just an average of 11 points per game to the opposing team this season. So they're not allowing many points. Trevor Lawrence, of course, in Superflex, you're going to start him. But if I have a better quarterback option, I'm going to leave Trevor Lawrence on my bench, temper expectations, and stay away from T-Law this week. Now, moving back into the tight end position, one tight end that I have a lot of big hope for, and I'm expecting to see a huge game from this week, is Dawson Knox from the Buffalo Bills. He's had an extremely slow start, and it's made people put him almost as a drop candidate. I know I personally actually just dropped him off of a team recently, and I instantly regretted it. He's only scored 16.1 PPR fantasy points in the first 3 games of the season so far. He's seen a combined 9 targets in the last 2 games. And this matchup against the Ravens is going to be extremely favorable. Their defense has already given up double-digit fantasy points to Tyler Conklin, who's a fairly decent streaming option if you're in a pinch, and Mike Gesicki, who I put on a drop list in the first week of the season. Mike Gesicki instantly was not what we expected, but he played really good against this Ravens defense. So I do expect Dawson Knox, and I expect this to be a really explosive potential game of the week with this Buffalo Bills and Baltimore Ravens matchup. So I definitely am going to think that Dawson Knox is going to be coming out of his slump and have a really big game and kind of show you what Dawson Knox is supposed to be in these lineups. Now, the last person we're going to be speaking about is my sit tight end of the week. The sit tight end of the week is going to be Hunter Henry, who, like Mike Gesicki we spoke about earlier, is damn near a drop candidate at this current moment. He was a top 10 fantasy tight end last season and has just been almost the exact opposite this year. He's being out-touched and out-snapped by Jonnu Smith, who's also another great tight end. But Hunter Henry has been tight end A1 or 1A in this offense. In the first 3 games, he's completely disappeared in this offense. He's seen just 5 targets through the first 3 games, which is 6 fewer than Jonnu Smith. He ranks among 17th among tight ends in routes run per the PFF Pro Football Focus. And the Packers are vulnerable to tight ends, but Hunter Henry just simply isn't getting the volume, getting the attention. And with Mac Jones most likely not playing this weekend because he was writhing in pain, I don't really see a world where Mac Jones starts this week, because even if he was okay to play, he would lose his man card for how he was acting last week if he was healthy to play. I mean, we all know that was a really serious injury, so you're expecting him not to play. So the fact of not having Macadelic in the offensive lineup this week is going to extremely hurt Hunter Henry, more than Hunter Henry's already been hurt. He can't take much more hurt, and neither can your lineup. So keep Hunter Henry out and maybe consider getting a good flex option off the waiver wire that you know somebody's not looking at, that you could instantly plug in or instantly gain some upside off of. Let Hunter Henry sit up there for the birds. Now, thank y'all so much for tuning into this week's episode of the Huddle Chat Sports Show. If you like the content, please do me the favor of smashing that thumbs up, that likes button. It helps me out so much. Make sure you tell a friend about this show, tell a friend about the RTP podcast, and hit that subscriptions bell. Hit that notifications as well. Stay notified, and I will see you next time. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Huddle Chat Sports Show, Fantasy Football Huddle. Y'all have a good one, and remember to be never out-hustled, never outworked, and you'll never be outperformed. Y'all have a good one. I'ma holla at you. Peace out.